The corridor lights of the Vren'traxian Dreadnought Vorin flickered crimson as emergency klaxons wailed. A single human floated in the middle of the observation blister, tethered only by the magnetic boots that had failed 30 seconds earlier. Blood blossomed from the fist-sized crater in his abdomen, crystallizing into ruby snowflakes the instant it touched hard vacuum. His suit was gone, shredded by the plasma lance that had punched clean through the hull and through him. Commander Zrastal watched from the armor glass, for eyes narrowed to slits. The human should already be dead. Exposure to vacuum killed soft species in under 15 seconds. Blood boiling, lungs rupturing, eyeballs freezing. Yet 38 seconds had passed, and the man was still moving, not writhing, not clawing at his throat. He was laughing. The sound carried somehow, even through the silence of space, as if the Dreadnought's hull itself transmitted the vibration. Low, wet, and utterly unhinged. It scraped across every comm channel, like fingernails on steel. Report, Zrastal hissed, mandibles clicking. His second-in-command, Subcommander Clive, flinched as though struck. Life signs impossible, sir. Core temperature dropping, but neural activity spiking. He's humming something. Open the channel. I want to hear it. Clive's claws hesitated over the controls. Commander, the human is in hard vacuum. There is no medium for her. Do it. Static crackled. Then the laughter poured through, raw and intimate, as if the man were breathing directly into their earpieces. AJ told you idiots, told you the hull plate was too thin here. Zrastal felt his dorsal spine stiffen. The human's lips were black with frost, yet they moved. Frost spider webbed across the man's beard, across the stubble that had grown during 3 weeks of captivity. His eyes, one brown, one milky blind, were wide and fixed on the observation window. Fixed on them, he raised a trembling hand and flipped them the middle finger with deliberate, painful slowness. Then he spoke again, voice ragged but clear, every syllable carved out a throat that should no longer function. Come on, Squidface. That all you got. Inside the command nexus, 30 Vren'traxian officers stood frozen. The scent of fear sweat filled the air, sharp and acrid. One junior ensign lost control of his lower bladder. The puddle hissed where it touched the heated deck plates. Zrastal felt something ancient uncoil in his gut. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Seal the blister, he ordered. Flood it with plasma. Incinerate the specimen. Clive's tendrils writhed. Sir, the human is still biologically active. The science cast. The science cast can scrape DNA from a bulk and be grateful. Zrastal's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Do it. But the human heard. Of course he heard. The external pickups were still live. He grinned. Teeth rhymed with ice. Blood frozen to garnet shards on his lips. Plasma? A cough racked him. Crimson globules spun away like macabre jewels. You're going to need more than that, Commander. He reached behind his back with the slowness of a dying man who no longer cared about time. From the small of his back, where the shredded suit had torn away, he drew something small and black, a cylinder no longer than a finger. Zrastal recognized it a fraction of a second too late. A Terran magnetic breaching charge. The human's thumb flicked the arming cap. See you in hell, calamari. He slammed the charge against the inner wall of the observation blister. The detonation was small, almost polite. A perfect circle of hull plating vanished outward into space, along with the human's torso. What remained of him tumbled backward into the void, arms spread wide like a crucifixion, still laughing as the vacuum finally, mercifully claimed the sound. For one heartbeat, the Dreadnought was silent. Then every alarm on the ship screamed at once. Clive spun to his console, mandibles gaping. Hull breach cascade. Sections 9 through 14 decompressing. We're venting atmosphere on 3 decks. Zrastal stared at the ragged hole where the human had been. Frost feathered the edges, and through it, the stars looked suddenly cold and close. Beyond the shattered blister, something drifted, a frozen human arm, severed at the shoulder, middle finger still proudly extended. And on the inner wall, written in the human's own flash-frozen blood, were 4 words glowing under the emergency strobes. We are not fragile. Zraskthal felt the laughter echo inside his skull long after the sound itself had died. It was not the laughter of a dying animal. It was a laughter of someone that had already decided the price of his life and found the exchange acceptable. He turned to his trembling bridge crew. "Find me every shred of data we have on Terran physiology," he said quietly. "Wake the High Inquisitor. Tell him the war just changed." Somewhere aft, bulkhead slammed shut to contain the breach. The Dreadnought limped onward through the void, bleeding air and certainty in equal measure. And in the silence between stars, a frozen human arm kept drifting, finger raised in eternal defiance. The Vren'traxian Empire had wanted a demonstration of human limits. They had just received it. The High Inquisitor arrived smelling of ozone and old blood. Vextera moved like spilled ink across the interrogation chamber's floor, his robes a living shadow that drank the light. 6 jointed limbs unfolded from beneath the cloak as he regarded the containment cylinder at the room's center. Inside floated a single human finger, severed at the second knuckle, preserved in a stasis field. The nail was torn. The skin was pale. The ridge of the fingerprint still carried the faint whirl of a man who had once signed his name Elias Rook. Zraskthal stood at parade rest, every plate of his carapace polished until it reflected the Inquisitor's eyeless face. He had not slept in 41 hours. The laughter still lived behind his eyes. "You are certain this is the same specimen?" Vextera's voice arrived inside the skull rather than through the ears, a violation that made Zraskdal's dorsal plates itch. "Genetic match is absolute," Zraskdal answered. "We recovered the arm. The charge he used was keyed to his own biosignature. No one else aboard could have armed it." The Inquisitor drifted closer to the cylinder. One needle-tipped limb brushed the glass. He laughed for 93 seconds in hard vacuum. Vextera murmured, 93. Our models gave Terrans 15 before unconsciousness, 30 before brain death. Yet this one spoke, joked, composed a message in his own hemoglobin. He turned, robes whispering like dry leaves. "Show me the rest." Zraskthal hesitated. "There is no rest, Eminence." The body was unrecoverable. The breach vented him into the debris field. "We have only the arm and the finger." Vextera's had tilted. "You are lying, Commander." The air grew thick, as though the room itself inhaled. Zraskthal felt pressure behind his eyes. "Level 9, he admitted at last. Containment Cell 9. We kept something back." The Inquisitor's satisfaction tasted like rust on the tongue. They descended in silence. The Dreadnought's level 9 was a place spoken of only in subharmonics. Corridors narrowed until even Vren'traxians had to turn sideways. The walls wept a clear resin that hardened into amber teardrops. Somewhere, something large screamed once and then thought better of it. Cell 9's door iris opened with a sigh that sounded almost relieved. Inside was a man. He sat cross-legged on the bare deck, wearing nothing but a pair of ragged prisoner trousers. His torso was a map of fresh pink scar tissue, where a torso had any right to be. A crew tattoo, an ancient sailing ship under full sail, rode the ridge of his ribs. The blind eye had been replaced with a matte black implant that glowed faintly, like a coal bank for winter. Elias Rook looked up as they entered and smiled with the lazy confidence of a man who had already died once today and found the experience underwhelming. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "Took you long enough. I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." Zraskdal's claws flexed. "You were ejected into space. I watched you die. Common misconception." Rook scratched at the new scar. "Turns out dying's a bit like spicy food. First time's a shock. After that, you build a tolerance." Vextera drifted forward until his hood nearly brushed Rook's face. The human didn't flinch. "You are not the original," the Inquisitor whispered inside their minds. "You are a copy, a clone grown in secret." The Terran seeded decoys. Rook chuckled. The sound was wet, almost gentle. "Buddy, I wish I was a copy. Would explain the hangover." He tapped a black eye. "This little beauty's a quantum-entanglement beacon. My original rode a life pod out the opposite side of your ship the moment your lance punched the hull. I'm just the echo he left behind to keep you busy. He leaned forward, chains clinking. Every second you spend poking at me, he's getting farther away. And every second he's alive, another beacon somewhere lights up. Another me wakes up in another cell on another ship. You killed one. Congratulations. There's a waiting list. Zraskthal felt the deck tilt beneath him. How many? He demanded. Rook's grin widened until it threatened to split his face. More than you have fingers, squid face. Less than you have nightmares. Vexthara extended a limb. A needle slid from the sleeve and hovered an inch from Rook's remaining eye. Pain is universal, the Inquisitor said aloud for the first time. The voice was soft, almost kind. Even echoes can scream. Rook met the needle without blinking. Go ahead, he whispered. Make me sing. Every note buys my brothers another minute. The needle paused. Somewhere in the distance, proximity alarms began to wail. Red light strobed through the cell. Clyde's voice burst across the intercom, frantic. Commander, Terran attack craft just dropped out of subspace, 3 light seconds off the port bow. They're demanding we release all human prisoners, or they open fire. Rook started laughing again, quieter this time, almost fond. Told you there was a list. Zraskthal stared at the man who should not exist, at the scar that crossed a chest that had been opened vacuum hours ago, at the black eye that reflected the strobes like a dying star. For the first time in his long and brutal career, the commander of the Kreshvoran felt something perilously close to fear, because the human wasn't bluffing, and because, in some cold, precise corner of his mind, Zraskthal realized the war had never actually started. It had only been waiting for humanity to wake up. The Kreshvoran shuddered as the first Terran rail slug punched through the forward shields. The impact was distant, almost polite, like a knock on a door you never wanted to open. Zraskthal stood on the shattered bridge, claws sunk into the command rail. Half the forward viewports were starred with microfractures. Beyond them, 3 human corvettes danced between the Dreadnought's point defense arcs with impossible grace. They were tiny, ugly things, matte black hulls scarred by re-entry burns and old battle welds. They looked like knives that had already been used. And they were winning. Return fire. Zraskthal roared. All batteries, full spread. Clyde's voice cracked over din. They're inside our firing solution, sir. We hit them. We hit ourselves. Another slug struck home. Somewhere deep in the ship's spine, a magazine cooked off. The deck lurched hard enough to throw Vren'traxians from their stations. In the middle of it all, Elias Rook sat chained to a stanchion at the rear of the bridge, barefoot, shirtless, and grinning like a man watching his favorite team score in overtime. Told you they'd come, he called over the chaos. Humans are sentimental about strays. Zraskthal rounded on him. You planned this. Every step. Rook shrugged. Not me personally. I'm just a disposable mouth. But, yeah, someone planned it. Someone always does. A new voice cut across the bridge, calm, female, and broadcast on every frequency at once. Vren'traxian vessel Kreshvoran. This is Captain Mar Calder, the Terran frigate. Don't start none. You have 10 seconds to power down weapons and open a channel, or we start carving your name into the hull, 1 letter at a time. The bridge lights flickered. Somewhere, coolant lines ruptured with a sound like screaming snakes. Zraskthal stared at the forward screen. The lead corvette had pivoted broadside, presenting a hull plate someone had painted with a crude cartoon squid wearing a human boot on its head. The caption read, "Who's fragile now?" He felt the laughter trying to crawl back up his throat and strangled it. Open the channel, he said. The main screen resolved into the face of a woman. Short-cropped iron gray hair. A burn scar that pulled the left side of her mouth into a permanent half-smile. Her eyes were the same brown as Rook's remaining one. Commander Zraskthal, she said pleasantly. You have something that belongs to us. Zraskthal's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment. Captain Calder. Your property detonated a breaching charge inside my ship. He murdered 17 of my crew. 17? Calder tilted her head. Elias, you slacker. Rook lifted his manacled hands in mock apology. Budget cuts. Next time I'll try harder. Calder's gaze flicked to the chain man, softened for half a heartbeat, then hardened again. "Here's the deal, Commander," she continued. "You release Elias and every other human you've got in your cages. You broadcast a full surrender on Empire bands. And we let you limp home to tell your Empress what happens when you poke the monkey." Zrastal felt every eye on the bridge turn to him. The Dreadnought groaned around them like a dying beast. "And if I refuse?" Calder smiled. It was not a kind expression. "Then we finish what Elias started. You got 9 seconds left." Rook leaned forward as far as the chains allowed. "Might want to hurry, squid face. Mara gets cranky when people waste their time." The bridge weapons officer, a young ensign whose carapace still carried juvenile mottling, raised a trembling claw. "Commander, our spinal lance is still charged. We could." "Could what?" Zrastal snapped. "Vaporize them and then die when their reinforcement arrive? There are always reinforcements." He stared at the screen, at the woman who held his ship in her teeth. "Stand down weapons," he said at last. The words tasted like ash. Every turret on the Kreshvorn went dark. Calder nodded once. "Wise choice. Docking Bay 7. 5 minutes. Try anything cute, and we turn your ship into a very expensive piece of abstract art." The channel cut to static. Silence pooled across the bridge, thick and poisonous. Rook started to laugh again, softer this time, almost proud. Zrastal crossed the deck in 3 strides and backhanded the human across the face. The blow split Rook's lip. Blood spattered the deck in perfect crimson droplets. Rook licked the blood away and kept smiling. "You're angry," he observed. "Good. Anger's honest. Fear's better, but we'll get there." Zrastal crouched until they were eye to eye. "You think this is victory?" he whispered. "You think rescuing one lunatic changes anything?" Rook's voice dropped to a conspiratorial murmur. "Commander, you still don't get it. I'm not the one being rescued." He nodded toward the main screen, where the 3 corvettes now hung motionless, waiting. "They are—" Zrastal felt something cold settle in his gut, because for the first time he noticed the hull markings on Calder's ship. Not military, not even official. They were names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Etched into every plate, every strut, every scarred and patched surface. Names of the missing. Names of the taken. And beneath them, in letters still fresh and bright, someone had just added a new one in dripping red paint. Elias Rook, still alive, motherfuckers. The Dreadnought's lights flickered again as docking clamps engaged. Humanity hadn't come for one man. They had come for all of them, and they were just getting started. The docking bay of the Kreshvorn was never meant to hold silence. It had been built for the roar of plasma thrusters, the shriek of boarding torpedoes, the wet crunch of conquest. Instead, 500 Vren'traxian Marines stood in perfect ranks, weapons reversed, claws open in surrender, while 32 humans walked between them like ghosts claiming an inheritance. They wore no uniforms, just black fatigues, mismatched armor plates, and the quiet certainty of people who had already died once and decided the afterlife was overrated. Captain Mara Calder stepped through the airlock first. Her boots rang on the deck like a judge's gavel. Behind her came a woman with a prosthetic arm made of scrap titanium and prayer, a teenager whose eyes were too old, and a man carrying a guitar slung across his back like a rifle. Elias Rook waited at the far end, chains already cut. Someone had given him a shirt. It read, "I got blown up in space," and all I got was this lousy resurrection. He saluted Calder with 2 fingers. "Took you long enough, Skipper." "Traffic," she said, and pulled him into a hug that cracked ribs. Rook exhaled something between a laugh and a sob, then stepped aside so the others could reach the cages. The cages opened without resistance. Humans stumbled out, some for the first time in years, blinking at light that no longer hurt. A woman with prisoner tattoos on her scalp fell to her knees and kissed the deck plating. A boy no older than 12 looked at the Marines, looked at the humans, and started crying so hard he couldn't stand. Zrastal watched from the upper gantry, flanked by Vextera and what remained as honor guard. The High Inquisitor's hood was thrown back for the first time, revealing a face that had no right to exist outside nightmares. Too many joints, too few bones, skin like wet ash. You will regret this mercy, Vexteral whispered into the air itself. Calder looked up, found Drastal's eyes, and smiled the small, tired smile of someone who stopped believing in mercy a long time ago. Mercy? She called up. Commander, we're not here for mercy. We're here for receipts. She gestured, and the guitar player stepped forward. He strummed a single chord that rolled through the bay like distant thunder. Every human stopped moving. Even the one still weeping went still. The guitarist began to sing. Not loud, just enough to carry. It was an old song, older than spaceflight. Something about a hammer and a bell in 40 shades of green that no one in the bay had ever seen. One by one, the freed prisoners joined in. Voices cracked, off-key raw. Some knew the words, some only the tune, some just a feeling. The Vren'traxians didn't understand the language, but they understood the weight. When the last note died, Calder spoke again. Every one of us has a story like Elias's, she said. Some got spaced, some got dissected, some got told they were property. You wrote those stories in our blood. Today we close the book. She raised a small hollow projector. A star map blossomed above the deck. Vren'traxian territory in red. Every colony, every fleet base, every ship. Then the red began to vanish. One by one, icons winked out. Not destroyed. Simply gone. Erased. Drastal felt his heart stutter. What is this? Calder's voice was almost gentle. While you were busy proving how fragile we are, we were busy proving how patient we can be. Every human you ever took, we tagged, tracked, mapped. The ones you killed sent postcard from a grave. The ones you kept taught us your routes, your codes, your blind spots. She stepped closer, boots ringing. Right now, across 100 systems, your empire is learning a new word. It's a human word. Starts with F and ends with ound out. Vexteral lunged, shadow ropes flaring like wings. Tendrils lashed toward Calder's throat. Rook stepped between them, caught the tendril in one bare hand, and twisted. Something snapped, wet and final. The Inquisitor shrieked, a sound like glaciers calving, and collapsed. Rook crouched beside the writhing form. Hey, remember when you said pain is universal? He patted the creature's cheek with exaggerated kindness. Turns out laughter is too. He stood, looked up at Drastal, and for the first time the grin was gone. You wanted to know why I laughed in vacuum? Rook said quietly. It wasn't because I'm crazy. It's because I knew, right then, that you'd already lost. You just hadn't stopped breathing yet. Calder touched Rook's shoulder. Time to go. They walked out the way they came. No one stopped them. The Marines parted like water. The freed prisoners followed, some limping, some carried, all singing under their breath. At the airlock, Calder paused. One last thing, Commander. She tossed something small and black. It landed at Drastal's feet with a metallic clink, a magnetic breaching charge. Unarmed. Souvenir, she said. When your Empress asks what happened, show her that. Tell her humanity doesn't do surrender. We do callbacks. The airlock cycled. The humans were gone. The bay lights came up harsh and cold. 500 Vren'traxian warriors stared at the deck, at their reverse rifles, at the empty cages. Drastal picked up the charge. It was warm from Calder's hand. Somewhere far away, a fleet died in silence. Somewhere closer, a song still echoed. And for the rest of his life, however long that turned out to be, Commander Drastal would hear laughter in vacuum, not mocking, just certain, because the galaxy had finally learned what happens when you underestimate something that has already decided dying is negotiable. Humanity wasn't fragile. It was contagious. And the infection had just gone galaxy-wide.